Today on Voice of Restoration.
The coming of the kings of the East. And I'm just going to give you a very quick summary. Rosh and Magog spoke concerning the location of Russia and its satellites. As you will see in that map, the portion where it is in green, you see Magog. To the north of it, in red, you see Rosh. That's the entire land, and all of those people, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, all of the Stan, they are all logged in that place. Now, Meshech and Tubal is also, a portion of it remains Russia, and a portion of it remains Turkey.
Teaching us to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. This is Voice of Restoration, raising an army of true believers.
Hello everyone, you're welcome to another interesting episode of the Voice of Restoration. This is a platform where we come to share the word of God, and I believe that you have been blessed following through with us. We want to appreciate you for always keeping dates with us. We do not take that for granted. God bless you. So we're continuing on the series titled The Coming of the Kings of the East. And God indeed has been speaking to us profoundly from the pages of scriptures, from the happenings around us, to let us know the reality of the times we are living in, so that we will prepare ourselves and not be taken unawares. So join me as I welcome the servant of God, Pastor Afolabi Oladele, as he brings us the word of God for today. We're glad to have you, sir.
Thank you very much, Sister Lucy, and thank you very much. I can only re-echo what she said, that we do not take your presence for granted. God bless you for being with us. This is the concluding broadcast on the series, this 7-part series that we started on the coming of the kings of the East. And the last time we were together, we shared with you the significance of the events that were happening inside inside China herself, as being what I would call a precursor in the demonstration of what the face of the serpent, what it is and what it does to people. We looked at certain scriptures from the book of Revelation, chapter 12, recognizing that this old serpent, Satan, the devil, will come at a point where he will stand in the face and in the presence of that woman that was heavy with child. We showed to you the ultimate intent of being in the face of the serpent is persecution, death, tribulation, if you don't do the bidding of the serpent. If there is any place where this has been well demonstrated, it's in China. And that's why we showed you those two clips concerning the Uyghur Muslims as well as the Christians. Today, we are showing you in depth how, with technology advancement, China has not only succeeded in the bid to reorder its own society, and not just reorder its own society, demonstrates indeed that it is possible to get a people to believe that what they are being told to do is in their best interest, whereas it was only unfolding the ways of Satan. This next clip that you are going to be seeing over the next 20 minutes is intense, and I ask that you please follow it with rapt attention. The development of technology inside China, the use of technology in the different facets of life, whether it's in terms of qualifying you for loans to get a car, whether it's in terms of your health care, whether it's in terms of even crossing the road, you will see how they have used technology to deal with different areas that are prima facie. On the surface, you will think, oh, these things are needed. These things are intended to make the society better. But the ultimate objective, the goal, is actually changing the society. I call it the reordering of the society. Watch this next clip and see how this is done.
Technology has helped China achieve extraordinary growth and wealth, but critics say it's facilitated a surveillance state. We begin the first of two stories focusing on Chinese technology in a remote area that's becoming more connected. In China's Lipu Mountains, past rolling hillside farms, the remote city of Guilin is nestled into a valley and built along a riverbank that's been inhabited for 10,000 years. Today, this old town is getting older, the population is older, and often needs medical care. The closest hospital is far, so on this day they line up for a mobile clinic on a bus. Visiting specialists have a small room in the back for x-rays, and a nearby room for eye specialists to check for cataracts. In this clinic, everything is electronic, and all the patient records and data feed into a single phone application. It's made by the company Ping An, and the app is called Good Doctor. Local doctor Luo Jiangshang says the technology changes everything.
Before we had this platform, patients had to go so far away. It was a big burden. Now, with this platform, it saves both money and time.
For decades, a country that suffered from widespread rural poverty relied on so-called barefoot doctors to provide remote areas medical care. Today, technology, from medicine to telecommunications to artificial intelligence, is helping transform the country.
China is quite unique because it's been a rapidly developing country. So we have very varying, uneven distribution. Technology helps to bridge those gaps and deliver service, particularly in an environment like this.
Jessica Tan is the co-CEO of Ping An, who's building towers over Shenzhen, China's Silicon Valley. Ping An boomed financially into the world's second-largest insurance company, but now it's celebrating by turning old insurance into new tech. In September, Ping An unveiled new facial recognition software for drivers. Those markings judge whether she's a good driver and feeds all of her data into Ping An's database.
Micro-expression recognition.
A separate application uses facial recognition to determine whether Ping An loan applicants are lying about their identity by examining more than 90 distinct expressions.
When you're nervous, there are these micro-expressions that people will do.
The system identifies abnormal emotions.
Verifying the person who they are supposed to be, in most cases, is quite accurate. So I think already better than the human eye.
And those human eyes, China's 1.4 billion citizens, are now entering more and more data on their phones. And in China, it's big data. Ping An's healthcare app has 250 million users. Ping An's car accident app that can automatically assess and cost damage has 200 million users. And China has developed so recently, the majority of all of those users have never owned cars or borrowed money or earned a credit score. So to choose loan applicants, Ping An's developed a social credit score based on all of the data users enter into their phones.
Having the expertise to change that series of raw information to actually a credit report or score that people trust. So we're able to do that based on your mobile phone bills, your shopping records, right? You do splurge on your spending. If you have a good credit record, you get the loans faster at a cheaper rate. So I think the idea is that there's incentive for people who have nothing to hide to want to share.
But in communist China, who decides who has nothing to hide? Like Ping An, the government is now converting data on its citizens into social credit scores. It's called Sharp Eyes, and those eyes are electronic thanks to the world's most advanced surveillance. The 5 most surveilled cities in the world are Chinese. China now has more than 200 million cameras, including at the entrance to an international conference. And cameras use software that recognize not only faces, but also how people walk, and can then track their location as they move. That allows cameras to judge behavior. In Shenzhen, cameras watch this intersection. If people jaywalk, they're publicly shamed when their faces are displayed on the screen.
Do you think because that camera is there, more people cross legally?
Of course. They're afraid to be seen doing something inappropriate. so they will change their behavior.
If you jaywalk, it reduces your credit score. For example, if you cross the red light, your score would be reduced by 2 to 3.
Behavior change is exactly what the government wants. And the credit score system is so important, there's even a Communist Party-produced national credit magazine. Wu Xiaoyan is the editor-in-chief.
The Chinese system's main purpose is to build a credible society of trust. This system has become an effective measure in our social governance. For example, on the bus, people with regular scores will pay regular price, and people with good scores only pay 80% of that.
Rewarding good behavior all across society and punishing bad behavior is enshrined in her magazine.
When I look in this magazine, I see an honor list in red, and then in black, a blacklist.
Those on the red list are people who have trustworthy behavior. Those on the blacklist are people whose behaviors are not trustworthy.
Does it work? Does rewarding people who act well and punishing people who act badly make more people act well?
Of course it works.
And something about that question made her uncomfortable. She and her staff walked out of the interview and the newsroom, but the microphones were still rolling and recorded their conversation about my questions.
What kind of question was that?
Don't talk about the government. Talk about companies, businesses.
We need to be calm. We cannot refuse to be interviewed. Not too rigid or serious.
10 minutes later, she did come back to finish the interview.
Everything okay?
She said everything was okay, but the government's critics say everything is not okay because they say China's big data is becoming Big Brother.
Companies that use the social credit system and the government say the social credit system improves people's behavior. But critics say that the government can use the social credit system to target and penalize anyone who opposes or criticizes the Communist Party.
In Hong Kong, protesters say mainland China is exporting a system of surveillance. So when they demonstrate, they climb up ladders and try and cover up the cameras. And protesters also cover up their faces. This 21-year-old and her friends declined to give their names for fear China would punish them.
Although I'm wearing a mask, they're like AI tracking down our faces, and maybe they will just use computers and recognize us in maybe just 1 second, and having all our identifications and all our informations. We are scared about it.
And protesters fear surveillance goes from cameras to inside their phones. They organize these rallies offline because they believe police hacked into their messaging apps.
We are super scared that our personal information will leak out and we'll get caught based on these informations.
Protesters' fears are accurate, says Jean-Li Fan, a long-standing critic of the government. He was willing to sit for an interview but refused to be seen with us in public, so he met us in our hotel room.
Are you, as a constant critic of the government, under surveillance?
Of course. We can feel this surveillance all the time. The Chinese authorities use a network of cameras throughout cities, facial recognition systems, as well as various mobile phone apps to monitor individuals. Surveillance is indeed omnipresent.
And that surveillance happens automatically and instantaneously. Every day, Chinese citizens send more than 45 billion messages on WeChat, the country's most popular messaging service. If you type in something sensitive, like a reference to the Tiananmen Square massacre in Mandarin, the recipient never receives it.
Sometimes my wife and I suddenly can't contact each other. I noticed that whenever foreign media reporters were trying to set up interviews with me, the police would always show up downstairs. And I've noticed that the police who follow me use the same mobile phones from Huawei.
Huawei is a $100 billion phone and technology giant that's the world's largest provider of telecom equipment. U.S. officials describe it as the symbol of high-tech Chinese government suppression and beholden to the Communist Party, alongside fellow telecommunications giant ZTE.
As a matter of Chinese law, the Chinese government can rightfully demand access to data flowing through Huawei and ZTE systems. Why would anyone grant such power to a regime that has already grossly violated cyberspace?
The Trump administration has mostly blocked U.S. companies from selling technology to Huawei, but the company is expanding its 5G or fifth-generation phone technology. And Vice President Vincent Pang says business is booming.
All our major customers choose still stay with Huawei. We signed a 50 contract with our major customers for 5G already. And this year, we will deliver 150,000 base stations outside of China. I think that is the fact.
And that expansion of Chinese technology around the world has enormous implications for China and the U.S.
And now we examine that expansion and why the U.S. believes it's a fundamental threat to democracy. We start by returning to Huawei to look at its influence far outside of China's borders.
It may look like an Apple event in California, but this is Germany, and the presentation is for the Chinese company Huawei.
World first 5G.
In September, Huawei launched the world's first chip with integrated 5G, or fifth-generation technology. It will dramatically speed up phones,
5G,
and is designed to connect everything around us, transmit huge amounts of data instantly, and transform entire cities.
We're now walking on the floor that touches everything in your city.
Huawei Chief Digital Information Officer Edwin Diender shows off what Huawei calls Smart City. Closed-circuit cameras feed into a database with advanced artificial intelligence, and facial recognition can identify everyone, cross-reference license plates, and analyze unlimited information. Diender calls it the future of policing.
Where, for example, today, teams manually need to have to look through CCTV camera footage. With a good video cloud analytics platform, you can say, I'm looking for a white guy, blue jeans, red t-shirt, and give an order or a query, almost like a Google search. I can say, find me this black car with this particular license plate, of which I think it is an L or a 7, a W or an M, but I'm not sure. Then the system can look into different camera points, for example, and does it for you.
Huawei promotional videos compare the combination of AI, 5G, and surveillance to how a brain processes information to control the body. The US fears that Huawei's information isn't secure because the control is actually the Chinese government's.
To have Huawei operating as a 5G network in our country or in our allies' countries, we believe represents a fundamental compromise of our national security and the privacy of millions of citizens.
It may actually be billions of citizens. Huawei and other Chinese telecom companies are building 5G and smart cities in more than 65 countries. PBS NewsHour producers in 3 continents heard praise from police and alarm from human rights advocates beginning in the Philippines.
There will be no let up in this campaign.
The government of President Rodrigo Duterte is waging what it calls a war on drugs. It's turned to China for help. In 2016, Duterte traveled to Beijing to secure Chinese government loans that allowed the Philippines to buy a Chinese safe city.
Huawei sets up safe city solutions.
In terms of the benefit of this project to the country, it's immeasurable.
Jonathan Malaya is the Philippines' Department of Interior and Local Government's Undersecretary.
If we are to ensure the safety and security of our countrymen, we must use every tool available.
But how are those tools being used? The government's opponents call the war on drugs an extrajudicial, murderous crackdown that's killed tens of thousands. And they say Chinese technology could enhance government suppression.
What a Safe Cities program is all about is increased electronic and technological surveillance.
Francisco Ashley Estadillo is a former congressman. He says Huawei is a front for the Chinese government. Founder and CEO Reng Zhengfei is a current member of the Chinese Communist Party and former officer of the Chinese military. And international researchers say Huawei employees regularly collaborate with analysts from the Army or PLA.
My concerns with Huawei is if a company which was founded and is still currently run by former PLA officers, that already is a problem.
Huawei insists that it's private and independent, and the Philippines government points to Huawei's success.
If you look at the Southeast Asian region, no country has banned Huawei. Why should we be unduly alarmed when the rest of the world is not alarmed?
But critics say that misses the point. because Manila's safe city could hand over unlimited data to Chinese companies that must collaborate with the Chinese government. Chinese law says, quote, any organization or citizen shall support, assist, and cooperate with state intelligence work according to law. China has no independent judiciary for companies to appeal.
They cannot say no to any request from the Chinese government for such kind of intelligence gathering.
We found similar concerns 5,000 miles west in Ethiopia. For more than a decade, Ethiopian and Chinese officials have collaborated to improve Ethiopian infrastructure, including the phone and internet backbone for state-owned Ethio Telecom.
Almost $1.6 billion, we have an agreement with Huawei. They are implementing the telecom infrastructure.
But that infrastructure provides a backdoor for intelligence agencies, says investigative journalist Daniel Berhane.
They designed the system in a way the security agencies can parallelly access the internet data and the voice data.
Berhane is the editor of a news site and was Ethiopia's first political blogger. He accuses multiple Ethiopian governments of repression and surveillance, but says Chinese technology has allowed this government to better exploit Ethio Telecom to spy on its critics, including journalists. Berhane says he too was targeted by government surveillance and his accounts were hacked.
Spy agency used that code and entered my Facebook account. Huawei was an accomplice in setting up the system in a manner. Huawei is doing a business. Why would they care about my political rights and my freedom?
That same question was asked by the new government in another country, 8,000 miles further west, Ecuador. ECU 911 coordinates Ecuador's emergency responses and receives a national network of 4,600 surveillance cameras. Juan Zapata is ECU 911's director.
Video surveillance and technology gives absolute results because there are eyes without resting. We have saved lives.
Former President Rafael Correa built ECU 911 with Chinese technology and Chinese government loans. In 2016, he gave Chinese President Xi Jinping a tour of the center. But the new president, Lenin Moreno, says ECU 911 surveillance wasn't only designed to save lives. It was built with a back door to Ecuador's intelligence agency that allowed ECU 911 surveillance to be weaponized against the government's opponents.
The tasks the institution should have exclusively focused on were diversified to a different task, a perverse one, espionage of political opponents, and espionage of citizens they had intentions to harm.
This is what that espionage looked like. In this safe neighborhood of the capital Quito, a single camera stands watch and looks right into a specific living room. Retired Colonel Mario Pazmiño was a constant critic of the former government. He says they installed the Chinese-produced camera to keep watch.
They choose Chinese companies because China had already developed a monitoring system that allowed them to have control over the activity of the population. Their gift is a Trojan horse, designed to control everything in society.
Which brings us back to Shenzhen and the core of the U.S.'s concerns. A White House official talking to me called this authoritarianism in a box. What's your response to that?
What do you want me to say? I think it's also liberation in a box. I think it's also city management and being very efficient in daily operations in a box.
Some governments are using that to persecute or target their critics. So can this be used for surveillance? Is it being used for surveillance?
Well, what you're looking at is an element of intelligent video surveillance, which is common technology that's available worldwide. Like every technology, it can be used in certain ways.
Does that concern you, that some of these countries might be using this?
Personally, yes, of course. I'm a person just like everybody else is a person. I have my own concerns and my own views, and yes, of course, that is a concern.
But the genie is out of the bottle. Huawei's been packaging smart cities and 5G for years. The U.S. is trying to contain Huawei's expansion and is building its own 5G systems. But the U.S. is behind, says another Huawei technology recipient, Indonesian Minister Luhut Panjaitan.
American technology is very good, but the last 5 years, I think the Chinese technology is much better. I think to some extent I agree to America about Trump policy, but I think it's too late to force China to to follow all American desire.
will lead to desired
Senior U.S.
results.
officials say they're trying to stop Chinese technology before it changes the world. But China's system of surveillance, facial recognition, and exporting safe cities has already changed the world.
While the world in 2020 awoke to the negative sides of 5G and the Internet of Things, the full use of these instruments of control and repression have been deployed in China, as you have seen, and surreptitiously is being sold to other nations. Indeed, it is also being progressively deployed in Western nations too. It's just that China has taken a forefront. When the warfare on 5G broke out, it wasn't just because people didn't want China, it was just an economic warfare. The fact of it, as is evident from what you just saw, that China, by the use of the technology deployed by Huawei, has the capacity to begin to listen in to whatever is happening in your own country. That's, like I said earlier on, you may hate Mr. Trump for his behavior, for his attitude, but he made some very right calls in awakening the world that, hey, there is danger. Nation after nation in the West have now seen that the use of the Huawei technology, the 5G developed Huawei technology, was just creating an open door. Beyond the fact that, remember, in many of these countries, by the economic domination, they are already using your money to buy your property. Look at the big cities in the US, largely owned by Chinese money. Why is Australia today kicking back so seriously against China? Because Chinese money has practically taken over things that are what I would call the economic live wire. Why is India, that we even call a developing country, why have they placed restrictions on Chinese money? Because beyond just taking advantage of the large cash surplus which they have in becoming a dominant economic forces in these other countries, deploying their technology will simply bring those nations to their knees. Because when they are able to get into your own security system, what defense do you have against them? Nothing. This is the part that developing countries like ourselves, we don't seem to even understand. In the clip that you saw that being deployed in Colombia, how it has become an instrument of repression against political opponents. And when eventually we get to see the end of the story of Ethiopia and Tigray, we will see who is providing the arms. What is giving so much boldness to Prime Minister Ahmed to say, I don't care about any of you people, I don't need any intervention. China's investment in Ethiopia are sufficiently massive for China to say, we will stand behind you in terms of armament. Watch China. Rulers of Nigeria, watch China. And you people of Nigeria, even if your government is sleeping or has committed lobotomy, stand up and be sure you defend your future and the future of your children. And I must acknowledge publicly the public broadcasting services of the US and Al Jazeera, because a good number of all the things that we have shown you were things that were done research through their libraries. Through the libraries of these two entities, a lot of that has come from them. And this next clip that actually concludes this series was taken from a very, very recent broadcast of Al Jazeera, showing not just China now saying, well, we've come of age. We want to be in the forefront of those who are now going to begin to regulate the use of internet. Everyone wants to regulate internet. Even Nigerian Minister of Information, the Nigerian Senate, they all want to control social media. China, seeing what social media has done on account of what happened in Hong Kong, they've come to the forefront now saying, yes, guys, we want to sit in the lead in the Committee of Nations on how we can regulate the use of internet. When you talk about the regulation of the use of internet, it's regulating the lives of you and me. And that's why you need to watch. I pray that the things that you have seen will not only alert you to the dangers that are here, but if you are a child of God, there is nothing to cry over. It's just for you to prepare yourself and align yourself with the word of the living God, because we have the full assurance of the word of God that he will take care of his own. In the midst of all these crises, those who stand in the faith in our God, your trust in God cannot be in vain. He stands to defend his own, and he will defend his own in this time. All that I appeal to you, don't dismiss these things, because in dismissing them, you set yourself up to be a victim of the things that are going to be. God bless you for being with us over these last 7 weeks or so, and I trust that we will meet again on this same media. God bless you.
Wow, it has indeed been an awesome time, you will agree with me. Thank God for his word that has come to us, and thank God for the ears that hear and the feet that will take action. I pray that the Lord will continue to strengthen you as you follow through with his word. Thank you for staying with us on this platform, and we look forward to meeting you again. Till then, stay blessed and stay connected to Jesus.
In mid-2020, a mobile phone belonging to Al Jazeera Arabic was hacked. Over the next few months, working with an organization called Citizen Lab, the team from Al Jazeera unpicked an extraordinary story of some of the most advanced spyware in the world and how it's used, not least on Al Jazeera's journalists.
With the click of a button, you can bring down nations to their knees very rapidly, if you so desire, and if you're willing to take the risks, because every system can be hacked.
Israel manufactures Pegasus, some of the most advanced spyware in the world. It first came to attention in 2016. Since then, various governments have bought the spyware for their own use. Questions today are, how does Pegasus work? Who is using it? And who are its victims?
Well, there's very little in the actual detail behind the Pegasus spyware. The code, the malicious code that was used, that's very, very difficult to find out more about.
حتى وزراء الدفاع الإسرائيليين الذين كانوا معروفون بكثرة حديثهم مثل أبيجدور ليفرمان، عندما كان يسأل عن هذا الموضوع كان يلتزم الصمت. الموضوع هذا يعني أنه يعتبر من البقرات المقدسة لدى إسرائيل، فبالتالي هي تسعى لمنع الحديث حوله.
Al Jazeera Arabic investigative reporter Tamer Al-Mishal followed a complicated technical process to track this infamous spyware. Over many months, he had one of his own phones monitored constantly with the help of Citizen Lab, an international research laboratory based in Canada that specializes in data surveillance. Citizen Lab was the first to expose the existence of Israel's Pegasus spyware in 2016. They disclosed details of what they called an exploit infrastructure connected to a phone belonging to an activist from the United Arab Emirates. The infiltration, the hack, led to the arrest of Ahmed Mansour, who remains in prison to this day. The new hacking technique was called a zero-day exploit, and Pegasus was the spyware used to infiltrate Mansour's phone. Bill Martzak from Citizen Lab has worked for several years to expose Pegasus.
So what happened in 2016 started with this man, Ahmed Mansour, the activist in the UAE, and he noticed some suspicious messages on his phone that he was getting via SMS. He thought they were weird because they came from unknown numbers and they were promising information about human rights. So he forwarded them to me at Citizen Lab. We had known each other for a while. I got a burner phone, not obviously my real phone, a burner phone, and clicked on the links. And while I was doing this, I was recording the internet traffic and recording the activity on the phone. And what was installed when I clicked the link was a very sophisticated spyware payload. And the interesting question was, well, who could be behind this? Who might have programmed this spyware? Who might have sold it? Who might be using it? And the process to figure that out is called attribution. So what we did in the report is we noticed that when you clicked on the link a second time, it wouldn't cause the infection. It was only limited to the first click. And the second click would send you to a decoy website to try and make it look innocuous or benign. So we clicked on it a second time, we got redirected to Google. But it wasn't just any redirect to Google. It was a very specific piece of code that someone had sat down and written on their computer. So we figured, well, maybe this is part of this spyware somehow, and if we can scan the internet, we can find other servers that have the same weird redirect to Google. So this is exactly what we did. We used the popular open source ZMAP program. We scanned the internet and found 149 other servers. And this is where it gets interesting, because this second redirect to Google was also returned by 3 servers, nsoqa.com, QAintQA.com, and mail1.nsogroup.com. And the name here, NSO Group, we found in a brochure in the Israeli government's website. They had a brochure for this company, NSO Group, which is based in Israel and sells a product called Pegasus, which is spyware for mobile phones.
In the case of Pegasus, Citizen Lab did very good work and was very conclusively able to say that Pegasus had been written by NSO Group. But it's actually extremely rare that we're able to get that sort of concrete attribution and say this malware was written by this company.
The NSO Group is a technology company based in Herzliya in Israel. Founded in 2010, it employs over 500 cybersecurity experts. Pegasus spyware is viewed as its most important product.
Israel is one of the most sophisticated cyber actors in the world. And I think that a lot of this is because the Israeli army is training people to do this sort of offensive hacking for, in their military service.
معظم العاملين في هذه الشركات هم خريجو من وحدة 8200 وهي وحدة خاصة أو وحدة مميزة جدا داخل الاستخبارات العسكرية الإسرائيلية. الأمر الآخر طبعا والذي ذكرته هو خضوع هذه الشركات لمراقبة أو لرقابة وزارة الدفاع وفق القانون الإسرائيلي.
Our NSA, which is called Unit A200, it's pretty big. We allow them to create companies. In order for the companies to develop, they need to make, what do they need to make? Money. They need to make money.
Tamar El-Mishal spoke to William Binney, who for over 30 years worked with the US National Security Agency. A former cryptographer and later a whistleblower, Binney was the NSA's technical leader of intelligence. Binney has a high-level understanding of the agency's data collection systems.
What that means is any iPhone or any phone in the world, first connecting to the network when you want to use it, you're immediately known worldwide. I mean, all the switches have you, and they capture your IPs and all that in your phone and MAC numbers and all that. That's how they bill you. So that also is known by the network, and the implants, computer network exploitation implants, they have around the world this was in 2004 or 2010, somewhere in that range, they had over 50,000 implants in all these switch servers and networks worldwide. I mean, that means they own the entire network, so that if your phone comes on the air, then they can know who you are and where you are.
When Citizen Lab exposed NSO and its Pegasus spyware in 2016, it attracted worldwide controversy. NSO claims its mission is to develop technology for government agencies to, quote, detect and prevent terrorism and crime. However, the nature of its targets, the individuals whose phones have been hacked, raises questions about these claims.
When Pegasus was released a few years ago, it was mainly targeted on human rights activists, journalists, and politicians, and targeted people, maybe of people with high wealth. But it's never really going to be used on Joe Public. If you were to target everyone in a mass net, I don't think that would be as important to the people behind it. They don't want to see my data, they don't want to see your data. They're going after specific people.
The danger of such spyware is its ability to infiltrate every piece of private information and hack the targeted device through the most used applications. In 2019, WhatsApp, owned by Facebook, accused NSO of hacking the popular communications tool. This raised fear amongst the huge numbers of global users of WhatsApp, especially at a time when some targeted victims appear to meet with dreadful consequences.
נגד האזרחים שלהם כדי לאסוף מידע, וזה לפעמים מסתיים במעשי רצח. ראינו את זה בערב הסעודית עם חשושגי, שעקבו אחריו, אספו עליו מידע כדי לדעת מה הוא חושב, מה הוא כותב, מה הוא אומר, ובסוף גם עשו עליו את המבצע הזה, המבצע הנורא הזה והמעשי רצח. במקסיקו היה פעם שמשטרת מקסיקו ושירות הביטחון המקסיקני, בעזרת התוכנה הזאת, ככל הנראה עקבו אחרי עיתונאי שידוע היה בביקורתו על המשטרה ועל הממשלה, ויום אחד הוא נעלם.
So if you do think that you are someone who's an important target, you're likely to face scrutiny by some government in the Middle East or elsewhere, and you are a journalist, an activist, or a member of civil society, I'd recommend that, yes, please do get in touch with Citizen Lab or other researchers who work in this space.
Tamar al-Misal wanted to know how difficult it was to monitor a phone suspected of being hacked.
Basically, it involves installing an app on the phone which allows us to inspect the internet traffic. And we do this for some period of time, depending on what the user would like. We can do it for a short time, we can do it for a long time, and try and identify suspicious patterns or evidence that the phone might be hacked.
While working as an investigative journalist, al-Misal received threats and other suspicious messages through different apps. The threats increased over the months, ramping up as he worked on more sensitive regional subjects. He decided to install a tracking app on his work phone, developed by Citizen Lab, to trace possible hacking. The conventional way to hack a smartphone is to send a suspicious message to the targeted phone that includes a short text and a link. When the user clicks on the link, software takes control of the phone and thus makes the device accept any command sent through the link. The device is then automatically connected to a server used by the hackers, and that is how the spyware gets installed on the phone. The user doesn't see the spyware on their phone, which has already been hacked. The hackers can then control the device and all its functions. The main challenge for spyware is to find a vulnerability in the targeted phone, particularly as modern smartphone security protection techniques have developed significantly. Pegasus managed to advance this capability considerably to be able to penetrate various kinds of smartphone.
Once the infection happened, the malware itself did the same stuff that we see a lot of malware do, which is spy on phone calls, spy on text messages and WhatsApp messages and any other encrypted messages you're sending, and turn on your microphone and turn on your camera. What made it especially sophisticated was that they were willing to use brand new exploits for iPhones to infect their victims. And some of these exploits could cost upwards of $1 million.
Each supply of Pegasus spyware to its clients costs millions of dollars, and it can only be used for a limited period of time. That means targeting a large number of smartphones for long periods of time costs hundreds of millions of dollars. This extremely expensive cost raises questions. Who can afford this spyware? Who are NSO Group's main clients? On its website, NSO Group says its spyware is, quote, used exclusively by government intelligence as officially requested by the governments themselves. Does this mean that Pegasus cannot be purchased by other parties?
When people leave the Israeli military service, they have all this very specialized, very highly sought after, well-paid knowledge, and so they take it to private companies such as NSO Group, right? And then they sell it to countries that are known to violate human rights. Because, even though they are, perhaps very intelligent about computer security, they clearly haven't thought so much about the human rights implications of what they're doing, or maybe they don't care.
פגסוס זה חברה פרטית שמוכרת, היא טוענת שהיא מוכרת את זה רק לגופים רשמיים, כמו משטרות, שירותי ביטחון של מדינות, אבל יכול להיות שזה הגיע גם לגורמים אחרים, אף אחד לא יודע, והיא מוכרת את זה לאותן ממשלות. אז היא מכרה את זה למקסיקו, היא מכרה, עד כמה שאני מבין, לערב הסעודית, היא מכרה לאיחוד האמירויות, והיא מכרה בקולומביה ובהרבה מאוד מדינות בעולם.
While working on this investigation, Tamer al-Mishal saw many signs of hacking attempts on his phone, the one he had fitted out to track any infiltrations. After 7 months, on the 19th of July 2020, he received a phone call from Citizen Lab informing him that the phone had been hacked. The hacking happened a few days after he had aired an investigative documentary about an Indian tycoon, which disclosed controversial leaked documents about the tycoon's links to the UAE and his flight from that country. Al-Mishal had used the same phone to communicate with officials and individuals in the UAE in order to give them the right to reply to the allegations in the film.
So the first thing that we saw on your phone was on July 19th, between about 10:33 and 11:28 a.m. GMT. There were a very high number of connections to Apple servers. Now, usually your phone will just communicate with one Apple server for iCloud, for your backups, for your contacts, syncing the information. But in this case, in less than an hour, we saw your phone communicate with 18 different Apple servers. And this was very unusual. You don't usually see this on phones. So that was the first clue that something suspicious was going on. And immediately after this communication stopped, we saw your phone reach out to this website, regularhours.net. In other words, your phone connected to this website. And this website stands out because we know from our research at Citizen Lab that regularhours.net, this website, is linked to NSO Group's Pegasus spyware. So we saw your phone reaching out to this NSO Pegasus spyware server, which led us to suspect and then later conclude that your phone was infected. So what we can see from the recording of your internet traffic, so let's go to this point in time here, 11:29, where the phone communicates with the Pegasus server. And we can look beforehand to see what was going on immediately before that. And the only thing that we see is this communication with iCloud, with Apple servers. We don't see any evidence that you pressed on a link or clicked on anything or went to any website. So what we think happened is that these communications with the Apple servers delivered the initial exploit to hack your phone. In other words, you didn't click on anything, your phone was automatically hacked, a so-called zero-click, like we say. Zero-click exploit delivered through Apple servers. This is a very expensive exploit. Yes, this is, if you think about the sophistication of exploits to break into phones, this is as good as it gets.
Zero-click means hacking without clicking on any links. Pegasus does not require any action by the user or a click on any suspicious links. the user receives a call from an unknown caller through the internet, and the phone gets hacked even without answering the phone call. After that, Pegasus spyware is installed on the targeted phone, taking full control of the device.
Well, it's definitely the most sophisticated attack I've seen in the last few years. The fact it was able to be installed on a target's device without the target even clicking on anything, so a zero-click attack. This is incredibly impressive. And like I say, very rarely seen. To be able to do that, it's so sophisticated. But as it is rare, it is difficult for us to really know much more about it. If something of this magnitude was able to be conducted to steal such data, this is a bit of a worry.
في هذا الاختراق zero click.
Tamer al-Mishal wanted to know if the zero-click process enabled complete access to all the applications and content on his phone.
As far as we know, they can access everything on the phone. We saw from looking at the log files on your phone that they were able to access the media framework, so they were able to turn on the microphone, turn on the camera if they wanted to, and listen into meetings or conversations going on around your device. They were also able to tap into the keychain on the phone. This is where your passwords for email accounts, social media may be stored.
The fact that Citizen Lab was tracking Tamer's phone helped him take precautionary measures to prevent sensitive information being accessed. The most important thing was for him to discover the moment the hacking took place and who else was affected.
But what we found, working together with Al Jazeera's IT team, is that your case was not the only one. There were at least 36 other cases inside Al Jazeera of phones that were communicating with servers that we linked to NSO Group's Pegasus spyware. In other words, there were many different people at Al Jazeera who were hacked and targeted, not just you.